Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. Now, friends, I want to talk about sometimes a tricky subject for most of us. Let's talk money today. My special guest is Lisa Linfield, and she's a personal finance expert, a keynote speaker, and course creator. And by the way, she's the host of her own podcast, Working Women's Wealth. She's a board-certified financial planner and the CEO of a wealth and investment management business called Southern Pride Wealth. With over 20 years of financial services experience in the UK and South Africa, she's been featured in Forbes, Thrive Global, Contemporary Business, Investing for Life, to name a few. Her goal, and I love this, is to teach 1 million women about money, how to make money, invest it, and protect it. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast today, Lisa Linfield. Hey, Lisa.
Hey, Mary. Thanks so much for having me on board.
I'm so glad you're here. We have started to dive into this topic of money and speaking to various guests over the last couple of weeks and months. One notably is Hilary Hendershott. She came on the podcast recently to simplify how to save for your retirement when you're self-employed, which is sometimes a scary thing if you don't have a pension, right? So where I'd like to take our conversation today is to build on what Hilary and I spoke on, but then actually talk about and simplify how to reach financial freedom. And this is specifically for those women out there that are listening that are small business owners. So where do we begin? Why do we, as women, and I'm going to stereotype sometimes, why do we struggle to talk about our finances with others? What's that all about?
I think it's such an interesting question because I think there is a societal impact that somewhere, somehow we're all taught that, money's dirty and you don't talk about, those things. Mm-hmm. But I think it's much more, it's much deeper than that. And the reason why is that finances or your money embodies Maslow's lowest hierarchy of needs. So if you think about your safety, your financial provision, the security of your family. In the old days, your land would be your safety and security. These days, it's money. And so the reason why we don't talk about that is because there is a deep sense of fear around the fact that we might not be as safe as we think we are. Or alternatively, that in actual fact, whilst the appearances are that we've got it all under control, if we even so much as dig under the surface, not only would other people know that it isn't there, but we also might realize ourselves that in actual fact, it's not there. And what I really tend to meet, or when I meet or see people, what I tend to find is that we all have a deep sense as to whether we're on track or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we don't want to uncover ourselves, is the reality that we actually know that we're not on track, that we actually know that the stuff isn't sorted, and that therefore our safety, our security, and the provision for our family is not under control.
And I feel like when I was back in the day working in corporate America in my early 20s, there are people that said, oh, well, it's really great. Get yourself an IRA, start saving. You see the hockey stick projection of if you save this much money right now when you're 22, just imagine how much you'll have at 41 or 61 or 81, right? And I, like most American girls, I dare say, was like, yeah, whatever. I'm never going to get that old. Like that's so many years away. And I foolishly didn't save. I didn't put a plan into place when I was that young. Here I am, flash forward to 41, owned my business for 16 years now, and will be the first to admit I'm one of those people that you're just described of like, wow, I really should have done something 20 years ago.
Absolutely. And we all know that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is right now. So whilst we all have that sense, the reality is every day you're not putting those things in place is one less day that it can grow. Yeah. And I always say that the great thing about this whole, in inverted commas, compound interest, it's not a fancy thing. It's just the concept of earning free money on free money. So the more days you have to earn free money on free money, the better life is. But when it comes to that whole thing of corporate America, one of the great advantages that entrepreneurs have is that they know they have to sort it themselves. Mm-hmm. One of the real challenges that I find with clients is that you say to them, you are so far short of your retirement target. And they come back and their immediate response is, but that's impossible. I've been saving my whole life. And so one of the fundamental assumptions that people working in corporates make is that the corporate is taking the right amount of money for your future. Now, there are two problems with that. The first one is that I might want to live on Fifth Avenue, New York, and you might want to live in a tiny shack on the outskirts of the coast, you know. So A, what is your future and what does that look like? But B, the way corporates compete for the great asset of human capital is that the lower they save for your retirement, the more money you take home and the happier you are, especially when you're 20 years old and you want to be buying nice fancy cars and new clothes and going to the latest snowboarding, holiday down in Vail, you know. So that's the challenge with this whole thing is A, the assumption that people have that corporates will save on your behalf, and B, the real putting off every single time that saving that you need to do now. Because you know what? Free money, hey, friend, let's all get some free money. But the problem with it is that you need to invest the money in order to get the free money on the free money.
Okay. So let's break this down. So I know this about our listeners is that most all of our listeners are people who have worked in corporate jobs and now have said, F that, I'm starting my own business. And they are in business for themselves, right? They're a small business. Maybe they're a solopreneur. Maybe they've got a team of about 5 people or so. So you have these 3 simple steps that really help people to reach financial freedom. Can you break those down for us?
So the first step is financial independence. And that is the basic place that all of us need to get to. And it's built up of 2 things. The first one is that your everyday money is under control. Your income is more than your expenses. You're not getting yourself in debt, and you're having a little bit of money to save and invest for your future. The second part of financial independence is that sense of peace of mind, that independence piece that comes when you know that you can generate the income you need to meet your basic needs. You know, whether we talk about this great lofty thing of retirement or financial freedom, and I love that concept, FIRE, financially independent, retire early, you know, because this whole concept of retiring early is a wonderful concept. But let's first get the financial independent piece. And that means that your medical bills, your food, your clothes, and a basic living expenses are taken care of so that you don't need to be dependent on your children when they're grown up and when you're older. So your first step in anything is to make sure that your basic needs are taken care of. And then there's the sense of being able to create a life that we want to live. So your basic needs go then into your wants, the things you want to do, go out for dinner, you know, do nice things, and then explore, go travel the world, go, you know, spend 3 months in New York, go do whatever you want to do. So, but before we talk about those lofty things of financial freedom, let's make sure that we have a deep sense of confidence that we never have to rely on our children to pay for our healthcare, our basic housing expenses, our living needs, no matter what it is, that is just out.
So in that process of kind of taking that assessment, am I spending more than what I'm bringing in? You know, are my outgoings bigger than my incoming of revenue and income? How much I'm paying myself? Can you talk us through just how we do that? Is it literally pulling out a pen and paper or creating a spreadsheet? How can we do that simply?
So I'm not a one for big, crazy tools. So I do have all of those wonderful things like Mint and other types of technology that pull out your expenses, and you can use those things. And once you've set them up, they take a little time to set up. You can very visually see this is how much my expenses are, and either my income is lower or it's higher. So those things are absolutely possible. Yeah. I personally track my income and expenses, both as a business and as a human, on a spreadsheet or physically with. I find that gives me a sense of control. And I have a very simple spreadsheet. You know, it's got very simple categories in it. I don't believe in overcomplicating. And I just literally put in the income, put in the expenses, and it just gets me in touch. You know, the problem with that plastic is you swipe. The problem with the direct debits that come off without you even knowing them is you just swipe. And the amount of times with my own clients, I say, but what's this money for? It's like, no, I canceled that a year ago.
Yeah.
It's still coming off.
It still leaks out.
Orders.
Yeah.
It's still there. And for me, that leakage element is just like taking those dollar bills and ripping them up. I mean, it's just nothing more than that. It's as simple as that. So I personally just literally, with my little Excel spreadsheet, or you can do it with a pen and paper. People who like bullet journals love making beautiful, income and expenses. But I just literally put it into a spreadsheet and just add 1 day a month. I take 2 hours in the morning and I go through every single expense and I put it in this little column and I look at it and I go, oh dear, it was a big month expense-wise.
Yeah.
Or I go, okay, that's great. I'm on track and I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
So, it's just the discipline of 2 hours. And what puts it in perspective is when people find out that they're paying expenses they shouldn't be paying, or actually they're digging a much deeper hole than they ever thought they were in.
Yeah.
And for 2 hours a month, pop it in a spreadsheet.
It sounds like awareness is the first step, right? Aware Absolutely. Of where you are even to begin with. Lisa, a tool that has started helping me personally, I live in the UK, and it's the best thing ever, is I have an online bank account with a company called Monzo. And Monzo, it was the easiest, and they're not paying me to say this, it genuinely was, the easiest way to get a bank account ever. I filled out a couple of things on an app, and bish bash boosh, I had a card in the mail 2 days later. But what's so brilliant about it is I use it as my debit and credit card. Just as my debit card for my personal expenses, not for my business. And every single time I use it and it takes money out of that account, it immediately gets tracked into a budget. And so I get a text message that goes, bing, this is going towards your eating out budget. Bing, Absolutely. This is going towards your vacation budget or whatever, and helps me actually track my expenses. And so for that, it really simplifies and helps me have that mental oh, wait a second, slow down, Mary. Maybe I don't need that cappuccino today. Or just it helps me simplify and have a much better idea of where my money is going each and every month. So I'll put a link in the show notes for people if you're curious to check out Monzo. It's really good.
Absolutely. And I think one of the first steps, the very, very first steps, is keep your personal finances and your business finances separate.
Totally.
Even if you're a sole proprietor, that first sense of awareness gets murky when it kind of is going everywhere. So even if you're a sole proprietor, I tell everyone just have 2 separate accounts. Just open 2 separate bank accounts and be very disciplined. And another fantastic tool, particularly for people whose income is seasonal or cyclical, is to put your revenue to come into one account, and then it literally pays a monthly amount every single month into your transactional account or your expense account.
Yep.
And what that does is it doesn't let the two get all murky. It keeps you strictly on a budget, and it holds back the money that you need that when, for example, in vacation time when you're not working. And just that little discipline of having a salary, both from a personal perspective and from a business perspective, means that you don't fall into one of the biggest traps, which is spend to zero. Because spend to zero is fine, but as a concept, because it's not spend to minus, where it falls short is the fact that life doesn't work equally every single month.
Right.
We can have the same income and we can have the same expenses in theory, but one month your geyser breaks and you need to fix it, or the car breaks down and you need to fix it, and your expenses are never constant. So spending to naught never provides for the cyclical income or unexplained expenses that just hit you.
Yeah, you get sick, or one of your clients doesn't pay on time and the cash flow of all of that goes wonky. I could definitely see that. And I 100% agree. Have your business and your personal finances separate. One more thing about Monzo I'll mention that is it's so genius. And this is where I always get excited about when technology starts to solve some of these very basic things that helps our lives, is they also have this pot system. So if you say buy a latte for £3.25, it will round that up to a £4 charge and then take that change and stick it in a savings pot for you. So it like intuitively is already like saving bits and pieces for you as it goes over. So I love that.
Absolutely. And some of these new tools are wonderful. Unfortunately, they're not always global, but they are. The great thing about that kind of innovation is it spreads quickly because it makes sense and it's easy to do.
Yeah. So let's break into step 2. So we already talked about financial independence, knowing that you can generate the income you need to meet your basic life needs. Now, what's step 2?
So the next step is financial freedom. And financial freedom for me is knowing that your assets, be it your business, be it the investments that you have, be it property investments, can generate enough income to cover your living needs, wherever you put those living needs, whether it just be basic needs, whether it be needs and wants, whether it be needs, wants, and explore.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of money I need for financial freedom and the amount of money you need for financial freedom are totally different. But one of the senses of freedom, that word freedom, that is hugely important is choice. It's the choice of whether I carry on working or not. It's the choice of how I spend my day, where I spend my time, and whom I spend it with. You know, because I, for example, choose to work. I don't need to work because I'm financially independent or financially free, but I choose to work. And that sense of choice allows you to really become and explore how you give back and serve the world out there. You know, I always think that, coming back to our good old friend Maslow, when people speak of abundance and all these wonderful lofty goals, those are absolutely perfect goals once your basic needs are in place. If you are fighting for survival, if you do not have the money to put food on the table or protect your children, abundance is not a concept that, you know, works well, because right now I'm hungry, my children are hungry, you know, it doesn't work. So that great sense of moving from financial independence, of that layer of worry that goes when you know that you can look after yourself for the rest of your life, into that sense of freedom that comes where you can choose the life you want. Now, for some people, that only comes at retirement, be it 60, 65, or 70. But as only 6% of the entire world will ever be able to retire in a way that they live their life like they did before, let alone lofty goals of traveling and exploring.
Yeah.
You know, 94% of us, that stage of getting to a sense of freedom where you can choose to give back and choose to really, you know, explore your best life possible, is something that we need to focus intentionally on achieving. And that's why I say the first step, financial freedom is a lovely goal. Financial independence, retire early, that concept, wonderful if we could all retire early. But first, make sure that you've got your independence sorted. Secondly, make sure that you get to a stage where you could be financially free. And then that last step is financial resilience.
So let's break down financial freedom first, because I feel like it's a matter of then understanding the investments that we have, property, stock, or IRAs, savings, right? Is there other things that I'm missing here in this part that we could be doing?
So you can invest in so much. I mean, these days you can invest in the most amazing sense of spectrum. But for most people, their first investment is a retirement fund of some form, because that comes in their corporate life when they're upskilling and all of that. And the first step in terms of any form of financial independence and freedom is that you never, ever, ever touch those retirement funds. The next step that most people then move on to is either property, if they're a concrete thinker, or other forms of funds, mutual funds, trackers, things like that, if you're a conceptual thinker. So some of us want to touch and feel where our money is going. We want to actually be able to smack the tenant if they don't pay on time, or, you know, physically see the thing that we've bought. Others don't want the hassle of, you know, the toilet that breaks or any of that kind of stuff. And they're happy to invest in a group of companies that rent out houses similar to the one they could have bought. So concrete people tend to want to buy physical property to invest, and conceptual people tend to buy mutual funds or other types of investments. And it's hugely important for all of us to have both of those first two parts. And the reason why I say both of it is that retirement funds tend to work on what we think is a great system, but in actual fact is a challenge in retirement, which is the fact that the government says, okay, you don't need to pay tax on this money that's going in, so you can grow it more and more and more. Mm-hmm. The challenge comes is that when you retire and you draw it down, you then do pay tax on it. So people think, oh goodness, I've got £100,000 or $100,000, and that's going to be, now I'm sorted. The only problem is that they don't. They have 100,000 minus tax. Mm-hmm. And that's the first step where everyone goes wrong. So when you have a capital asset, so some money invested that's not physically in a retirement fund, all you're paying there is capital gains tax, and that's in most countries a lot less than income tax. So you need both of them, because as I always say to people, the accumulation phase or saving for your financial freedom is one set of goals and tasks, but managing when you're drawing that money down is a whole nother set of goals and tasks. And almost the biggest factor, or one of the biggest factors in that, besides how much do you have, is how much tax are you paying. So you want to try and have different sets of assets, retirement funds and non-retirement funds, so that you can choose to manage your tax. Then you want to try and reduce your risk, because what we do know for a fact is that at different times, different assets grow more than at other times. Mm-hmm. And so what you want to do is, yes, you have your retirement funds in a lot more conservative, because usually they're regulated what they can invest in. Then you have your other investments, which you choose where you put them, physical property, mm-hmm. not physical property, mutual funds, etc. And then you can start to diversify. And sometimes people choose to diversify into creating other assets like gold or things like that. But a lot of the times, diversification is also around a different country and a different currency. Because the reality is the world doesn't always do well or do less well. But the last asset, that is the most important asset for most of your listeners, is the business that they have. Mm-hmm. And one of the decisions that we all need to make as small business owners is this business a lifestyle business, or is this a growth business? Mm-hmm. And it's a really key decision. So a lifestyle business exists to generate the income I need to live my best life possible.
So give an example of a lifestyle business, like a graphic designer or something like that.
So I'm a graphic designer, and I choose that the thing I love most in life is actual design. I like to actually do the design myself. And I want to be able to only work Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because Monday and Friday, I want to take off for a long weekend. Mm-hmm. That's a lifestyle business. It generates the money I need, pays my expenses, and I love what I do. Now, a growth business is when a graphic designer says, I want to build an enormous, the next Wonderman, the next amazing mm-hmm. graphic design business. So what I'm going to do is hire other graphic designers and work from them. I'm then going to need to hire project managers, creative directors, account managers, etc. And that's when the graphic designer moves into a growth business. Mm-hmm. And the reason why understanding which one is hugely important for your listeners is when it comes to later on in life, the person who builds a growth business, and essentially it's a business of roughly the most profitable ones are 25 people or more. The person who grows a growth business is able to sell that business and make some money that they can retire with. Mm-hmm. The person who is a lifestyle business owner, it's just me, myself, and I, is never able to do that, because your clients are your clients because of how amazing you are.
Because you're the asset in this.
Because you're the asset in that. The other challenge is when we all know that a 100-year-old graphic designer might not be in as much demand as a 40-year-old. Mm-hmm. But what we don't think in our brain is, what is that pathway? Because we all think that we're going to be doing graphic design when we're 50, 60, 70, but will we be doing it when we're 80? Mm-hmm. And then who's paying for frail care if the business is not generating the money?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the hugely important things to think for your listeners to think about in terms of looking at their long-term financial freedom, is the assumption that they can continue to generate income out of this business. Because I don't know when they will need to stop. But we all know that a 100-year-old is probably not going to be doing design. So somewhere along their journey, they are going to need to stop. and where is the money going to come from? And secondly, if you have a lifestyle business, you are not going to be able to sell it for a fortune of money. At most, you will sell your client list for 1 times the revenue of your business. And so you're not going to make the money to set off into the sunset either, because 1 year's worth of revenue is enough to probably keep you going for maybe a year and a half. So we need to think carefully about having not only investing money to grow our business, but also to invest in other things like retirement funds and like other forms of investments, so that when we are no longer able to be a graphic designer, there's stuff in place to put the food on the table, pay the medical bills, etc.
Okay, so what I think I hear you say in all of that, and hopefully if you are listening here at home, you haven't hit the stop button and gone, oh, this is too much. Put my hands up. Oh, too much. Please, I hope keep listening on. I hope we can really simplify this for you. Is 1, map out what you want as a vision. Like, how long do you want to live and work in this lifestyle business? Do you want to retire when you're 65, or do you want to be a graphic designer till you're 75, 80? I mean, first saying that, it's like, what is your vision of ideal? And then I think what also you're saying, or at least maybe what you're not saying, but I'm certainly reading into it, is get a financial planner to help you chart the course. Because I think that's where it gets scary for small business owners. And again, I'll be the very first one to admit as a guinea pig, is that you don't know what you don't know, right? And so you just keep chugging along in your little hamster wheel of running your business and go, when you could just put simple things into practice, whether it's a Roth IRA or an investment plan of sorts, that, you know, and having somebody like you, Lisa, or that can say, okay, well, have you thought about diversifying your retirement plan this way? Then it makes it a lot easier. So yes, that's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, which potentially was an incorrect answer to your question, but what I would add to that is you need lots of different things. Don't put your eggs in one basket. So people shouldn't put all of their money into an IRA. They also shouldn't put all of their money into gold, nor should they put all of their money, time, and bet the bank on their own personal business.
And why is that? Why not put all money in one thing?
Because it's risky. Because at different times, sometimes shares do wonderfully well. Sometimes gold does wonderfully well. Sometimes the stock market crashes at the point you want to retire. Right. And that doesn't work. Sometimes the industry you're in is going to be completely taken over. So your assumption that you can be a graphic designer until you're 75 is a risky assumption. It might be that you can, but it also might not be. So it doesn't matter what it is. You need to have eggs in every single different type of basket. And when it comes to your own business, you also need to be pragmatic about the fact that you're not going to sell it at 60 and make a billions. You might do if you choose to make it a growth business with lots and lots of people in, because then someone can just buy an ongoing concern.
Right.
But if you're an individual photographer or graphic designer or chef, you cannot rely on the fact that selling that business is going to generate you mountains of cash, no matter how successful it is. And that's what I find, especially in solopreneurs and very small 5 people or less businesses, is that people still do hold onto the fact that they can sell it for the money that's going to pay for their retirement.
And that's a big mistake.
And that's the big mistake.
Okay, so let's move on to step 3, financial resilience. Tell me more.
So financial resilience is the thing that is often the least done part of finance. And it's that safety net. It's that safety net that makes sure that you and your family are able to continue to live in the same way that you do today. So many of us have fought extremely hard to give ourselves and our children maybe a better life that we have, or at least a similar standard of living that we had when we grew up. And the challenge is life happens. So there are a number of different steps that we need to put into place to make sure that we are able to sustain life's knocks. So the first one is that all of us need an emergency fund. Because one of the sense of feedback that I get from my listeners and from my clients a lot is, I was just getting my head above water and then. And then the car broke down, and then grandma needed an emergency medical procedure, and then my kid got sick. So, and that for me is hugely important. If you are employed by a company, that needs to be 3 months of after tax expenses. If you are a solopreneur, that often needs to be 6 months, because we don't have the ability for our company to help fund us if we need to take sick leave, if we need to take, if we don't work, we don't earn.
Right.
So, but for many people in corporates, if they need to take sick leave or parental leave or any of that type of thing, there is money to cushion them. So the first one is life's everyday knocks. Then you start getting on to bigger things. What happens if you're retrenched? Do you have, do you have severance package, or do you have insurance that covers that? The second one is, what happens if you get sick? So especially, and this is where I come to solopreneurs and to entrepreneurs, is illness is one of the biggest ways to stop your money from coming through the door. Because if you're not there to do your graphic design or take your photographs, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And particularly critical illnesses, your big four are cancer, heart attacks, bypasses, and strokes. Those are the big four that knock 75% of people who get a big disease get taken off by that. So do you have critical illness or dreaded disease insurance? And then lastly, what happens if you die? Is it all in place such that your kids can continue living that life that you have worked so hard for them to live? And here I had one of those real watershed moments very early on in my financial planning career, where I read an article, and there was one sentence which a guy said, there's 10 years difference between myself and my sister, and I grew up middle class and she grew up poor. And that's what we don't want to do to our family. We don't want the fact that when we die, we leave our family at such a significant disadvantage that they're not able to meet their basic financial independence.
And, I feel like I'm going through this right now. I have aging parents, and and going through these conversations as the child in the conversation with them. Gosh, it is so incredibly important to have a will. It's so incredibly important to do the steps to get the finances all sorted so that there aren't any surprises in the end. Why do you think it's so hard sometimes, and what stops people from drafting up a will, and how do we get past that fear?
So I think there are two big categories. I think, maybe three, but the first one is that when people are sick, so I do find it in patients who have potentially terminal illnesses such as cancer, is that drafting the will is accepting that plan A might not work, plan B might not work, and that you might end up dying. And for many couples and for many people that are going through cancer or terminal illness, that you need to hold every cent of hope. Every little piece of hope that you have needs to be held. And so what happens is that we don't even discuss the option that this treatment might not work or the next treatment might not work. We hold a strong sense of stoic hope that this is going to work. And so we don't actually put those things in place. So that's the first reason. The second reason in people with young children as to why they don't have a will is that they can't agree if both of them die, who gets the kids. And it's a major contentious. I want them to go to my brother, you want them to go to your sister, but we think that the parents should have them, but the parents don't think that they're right because they're too old, and it doesn't get done. And I know personally from my own experience, my husband and I never signed the will because of this, our first will, because of this issue. And what I say to my clients is put them in a hat, draw out the name, let's write it in, because tomorrow you can change your will. But if you die today, without a will, the state will decide, the government will decide who they go to. Yeah. And that is something I don't ever want. I'd at least like, some say in where my children go. But it's literally, you can have as many wills as you want. So put something in place, and if you decide to change it tomorrow, change it. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is that all of us think that we're going to live forever. We don't think we're going to die tomorrow walking to work. And it's just as likely that we could as anybody else on the street. So other people might have these remarkable accidents, but not us. We are going to live at least until we're 100. And that's why we don't do it, because it's admin and it's hassle, and I can do it tomorrow. And the problem is tomorrow becomes a month of tomorrows or a year of tomorrows.
Yeah. And I think this is what I'm hearing you say is that you don't wait till the end when you're really, really sick or your spouse or your child is really sick to draft up these kinds of paperwork. It's doing it now, like in the day-to-day minutia of your life, like building that time in now to put those pieces in place so that when you are in high stress, high crisis mode later down the line, you at least have some building blocks in place.
Absolutely. And especially if you have minor children, as married people, generally it'll tend to, even if you don't put something in place, the law of the country will say it goes to your spouse. But the minute you have minor children, and, in most countries, if it's split, it'll be split between a parent and the children. Minor children cannot inherit property. They can sometimes in some countries inherit physical property, but they cannot inherit bank accounts of cash, shares, any of those things that aren't physical property. And if they can't inherit it, what happens is it goes for safekeeping in the government. And, there are some amazing governments out there, but I would rather trust my financial advisors and my support system to execute my wishes rather than everything being decided by a government. Mm-hmm. So specifically, if you have children under the age of your minor age, which is usually 18, especially when it comes to financial stuff, is make sure that you've got a will in place that takes care for who looks after them and what happens to the money.
Mm-hmm. And from my own personal experience, again, this is here in the UK, drafting up the will wasn't as big and scary as I thought it was until I actually did it. So we found a local solicitor attorney, and I think it was a flat fee, and she came to our house twice. And, the first time she asked us a whole series of questions and we worked through it. And then the second time she said, okay, well, here's your will based on what you said. Look through it, what questions you have. it really was very simple in the actuality of like how to get it drafted up. So it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. Just a side note to everybody, if you're looking for resources online on where to even begin to start like this process of educating yourself, I highly recommend checking out Lisa's website. It's workingwomenswealth.com. And again, we'll put the links in the show notes for everybody to check that out. Because again, you don't know what you don't know. And this is one of those big, scary things. So we go, oh, well, I'll do it next week. Or, oh, well, that's a really good idea. I'll do it next month when I'm not busy, right? But really what we're saying is do it now.
And there's also a fantastic tip that I learned from David Allen, his book, Getting Things Done, is don't put on your to-do list, write a will. Mm-hmm. Put on your to-do list, ask Mary, Jane, and Sue who did their wills and get the solicitor's name from them. Yeah. And literally that's the first step you need to do. Then the second step would be email Mary, Jane, and Sue's solicitors. Mm-hmm. It's really not that big a deal because someone in your network, someone somewhere has it. Or alternatively, there are great free resources online.
Yeah, great. So, Lisa, I feel like I could talk to you for ages, and I think I'm going to have to just bring you back for a part 2 later down the line this season. Because I feel like with this step 3 of financial resilience, we talked about major illness, but we also, death, and what about a divorce? Like, how can one protect themselves through a divorce? Or is that a whole other episode altogether?
That's a whole other episode. In fact, I actually did an episode on all the things that you need to know about divorce because there's so much you need to know even before you even start thinking about it. Yeah. And then through the process to protect yourself and to protect your kids and to protect your future life. And some of them are really easy things to think about, but some of them are worth kind of really contemplating how it is that you move forward. And you know what the thing is? It's the wisdom of the community out there. It's not things that I've learned or grown about. But divorce is something that can decimate your wealth. Mm-hmm. It can decimate your business. And especially if you're a business owner, like your guests, your listeners are, that's one of the big questions, is that for many countries, half of your business belongs to the spouse that you're about to divorce. And how do you deal with that? And it does have particular nuances. We just all watched Jeff Bezos's divorce and they created a separate share class for the things because he doesn't want his ex-wife voting on the Amazon things. So there are a lot of things, but the most important thing is that I would say to your listeners when it comes to divorce is tap in before you consider doing this, or tap in when you're first thinking about getting a divorce, because the better prepared you are, the better you get your head around not only what assets you have, but what are the easier ways to get through a very difficult, very hard, and very traumatic, both financially and personal process.
Yeah. So we'll put a link in the show notes to that episode on your podcast so people can listen to that as well. So let's end here. Is there an easy way for people who are listening to work out, like, how much do they need to save to be financially free to retire? Is there an equation or how much to put away? Or is there a way to simplify that down?
There actually is a way, and it is not accurate. So that's the first thing I'd say is if you want to find out exactly how much you need to go and speak to a financial advisor.
Great.
But I like rule of thumbs and simple ways that put us in the right ballpark, because I always think that's the first place to start. And essentially, there are two formulas. Firstly, if you're in a high inflation environment, and secondly, if you're in a low inflation environment. So if you're in the UK or you're in the US, where you have low inflation, you have lower growth rates, and just different dynamics, you can take your monthly income and you can multiply it by 400. And that's what you will need. So not your monthly income, your monthly expenses that you need. And remember that needs to be before tax. So don't take your after-tax money. But let's say, for example, you need £1,000. If you need £1,000 and you multiply it by 400, you will need £400,000 in order to get £1,000 a month. If you're in a high inflation area like South Africa, you multiply it by 3,000. Wow. So we work in larger numbers. So your £1,000 might be our 10,000 rand a month that we need. Might be a similar. You call it the equivalent living standard. So the equivalent living standard of £1,000 is 10,000 rand, and 10,000 rand multiplied by 3,000, you need 3 million rand for every 10,000 rand of monthly expenses. So if your monthly expenses are £1,000 or $1,000, roughly you're going to need 300,000 for that. And that at least puts you in the ballpark of understanding your road ahead. And remember that as inflation goes every single year, you need to increase that money, because that loaf of bread doesn't cost the same today what it costs tomorrow. And you need to work towards, again, saying, okay, the first £1,000 I need to save is for my medical expenses, my bread, my food, and my basic living expenses. And then you tick that one off. And don't try and work some big £6,000 a month goal. First start with, what does it take to become financially independent? Then to get to my needs, my wants, and then my explore. And that's the simple rule of thumb for your listeners.
Brilliant. And, again, what I think I hear you say is, there are the logistics side of figuring out all this stuff. And it's like learning all the things that you could save your money in a Roth IRA or otherwise, and finding a financial advisor that you trust that can help you understand the logistics side. But then there's also this mindset side of not going at this with such fear. And fear only comes when you're not educated on something, right? And so it's a tandem two-way street, I think, when it comes to talking about money, is being open to learn things that you don't know over here on the logistics side, but then also being open to, squash the stinking thinking when it pops up and goes, this is scary, or, I'm not worth it, or, I'm living in scarcity versus abundance. I think it's a two-way street there.
And I think you're absolutely correct. The first thing is your mindset, and these things aren't hard. You can get extremely complicated and wait until you have perfect knowledge.
Yeah.
Or you can take $20 or £20 a month and save it every single month, and work that becomes 25, and then that becomes 30, and that becomes 35. And you just work slowly until you get to £300 a month, £1,000 a month, and move it up. So long as you're doing something whilst you're educating yourself.
Yeah.
And then pick a podcast, a blog, something, and commit to one article or episode every single week. And you'll find that in a year's time, you have a ton more knowledge and you've saved something. So I even tell people who are in debt, which isn't standard practice, but I even say to people, even from then, it's so important psychologically to start saving for the future. Even if it's like literally $10 a month.
Yeah.
Put that $10 a month, start with something little. Take that first step, because it'll be amazing how much you then say, oh, actually, I can increase it. Oh, actually, I can. And you find yourself suddenly in a position of feeling stronger about your finances.
I agree with that 100%. I think when you do those things, it unlocks something in your brain, that new neural pathway that you build in your brain of saying, oh, well, this isn't hopeless. Like, this isn't as big and scary as I thought it was. I can actually make progress here. So again, just a reminder to those that are listening, you can find Lisa online at workingwomenswealth.com. I highly recommend listening to her podcast as well. It is chock full of good stuff there. So please do pop over to there and to the show notes to be able to find that Working Women's Wealth podcast. So Lisa, where could people find you online? Do you hang out at Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter? None of the above? All of the above?
Well, I try all the above, but in actual fact, like most things, I simplify it. Mm-hmm. And my two main channels is Facebook. You can look for Working Women's Wealth on Facebook, or alternatively, Lisa Linfield SA on Instagram. And that's kind of where I post things more regularly, more generally. Mm-hmm. But alternatively, my website, workingwomenswealth.com, has a lot of great information.
Perfect. And I'll put all the links to your social media channels in the show notes as well. And you've also provided a freebie to our listeners. And again, the link is in our show notes, but workingwomenswealth.com/peace of mind. Can you tell us a little bit more about the checklist you're providing?
So this is a checklist I like to start with everyone, which is essentially 16 things that we need to have financial wealth. And that takes the independence, the resilience, and the financial freedom piece all together and says you need these 16 things, because most people don't know where to start. They think of this and they listen to a podcast like this and they want to run and hide under the bed and pretend it never happened. Yes. So
please don't do that.
Absolutely. And so what this does is it just gives you 16 things to think about. Yeah. And then I say to everybody, just choose one. I did this with 350 people in a room, and the highest score was 10 out of 16 for the finance director. So really kind of know that nobody has all of these. Most people don't have all of these things in place. Do the checklist, download it, do it, and then pick one. And then if that one, for example, is will, then don't write, get a will done. Write, email Mary, Sue, and Joe and find out who their lawyer is. Yeah. And just literally work through that one thing step by step until you can cross it off, and then start the next one.
And chip away at it until it's done. I mean, you say on your podcast and in your website, and I appreciate this, like the biggest gift that you can give yourself is financial peace of mind. So if this is big and scary to you that is listening at home, like this is the thing that could help you break through and make clarity.
And most importantly, because I think that all of us know in our gut that we don't have it sorted. Yeah. So even if we are running and hiding, it never goes away because we know we don't have it sorted. So take those first steps, baby steps.
And do the thing. Yeah. So Lisa, I have a couple of questions before we wrap up that I like to ask everybody that comes onto the podcast. And again, thank you so much for your time and being open and free and willing to share all this information, because I think this is how we make change. This is how we make a positive impact in the world. And so I appreciate you. One question I'd like to ask you is, what is one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or maybe poking holes and challenging you in your belief system these days?
So one of the books that I'm going back to a lot at the moment, I'm busy finishing off a course called Brave to be Free, because like you just said, I think 10% of the stuff is what you need to do, and 90% is getting over the stuff in your head. Yeah. And in my own journey, especially starting my own business, I was a very confident corporate person, but starting my own business creates a lot of fear, or uncovered a lot of fear inside me. And there's a book by Susan Jeffers called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Mm. And what I love about this book is that it's over 25 years old, and the wisdom is absolutely perfect. I'm not one of those that says, oh, don't worry about it. Or, when someone's angry, oh, no, don't be angry. You're like, just like get over it. I like the fact that her whole concept is based on feel the fear. Mm-hmm. So feel the fear that rises in you when you think about your finances. but do it anyway.
I love it. We'll put a link in the show notes for everybody to check that book out. It's been a while since I've read that book, so maybe this needs to get back on the nightstand and read again. Check it out from your local library. So tell us, who's one person in your network or even your clients who you just feel is up to brilliant things these days, and that we could shine a spotlight on him or her and maybe even potentially interview them on the podcast?
So there's a fantastically talented woman called Paula Sartini, and she's a South African, but she is an IT innovator in a space that is so dominated by men, and it's wonderful. But she is a woman doing great and brave things. And what she has done is she has created a set of software that lives on top of the Microsoft Office suite. So you don't need to change anything. And what it does is it standardizes your brand, and it standardizes things that are repeatable. So, for example, your sales pitches. You can choose slide 1, 3, 5, and 7, and you just tick, 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 and they just build it. Because the challenge is, as we grow, we need to make sure that our processes are simplified, streamlined, and the same things go out easily. And so this sits on top of your mail, your Word, your PowerPoint, and it brings it all together, and then it checks that all your fonts are correct, your brands are correct, etc. And with a click of the button, it just works beautifully.
Brilliant. She's my kind of girl. Well, we'll definitely put a link in the show notes for Paula as well, and hopefully we'll have her on the podcast soon to showcase her. So in my beliefs, I think that gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell us, what's one thing you're grateful for right now in your life?
My husband. I'm doing a lot at the moment, and I'm building a new business, which means that I'm doing a lot by myself. And there's a lot I need to do about myself. But he gives an enormous amount of support and space and looks after my kids so much, and me, that without me ever having to think about it. So I am extremely grateful to have a strong, stable, anchoring force in my life at a time when I need him the most. And there's nothing, he's not a Gigi rah-rah kind of guy. He really is he just gets it done without even complaining. And so I'm very grateful for him. It's one of the things I always say to young people: choose your partner wisely, because your success strongly depends on that person who is there to partner with you on your journey. That's and beautiful. You on theirs.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Again, everybody can find her at workingwomenswealth.com. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. My one final question for you is this. Somebody somewhere is listening to this episode right now, and she's chuckled along with us, but also she's desperately wanting to go hide under the sheets and not face any of this whatsoever, because it is big and scary. What's one thing you could whisper into her ears right now just to encourage her on her money journey?
Be brave to be free. You need to be brave. And we never think of the Princess Warrior as brave when she's parking on her couch watching Grey's Anatomy. Braveness is those everyday steps of courage that we have to take, that despite the fear we feel, that we take those steps of courage. We ask our boss for a raise. We force ourselves to Google how to write a will or how to get a will. We do those things that we would rather not do, because our brains want to keep us safe and comfortable where we are safe and comfortable. But if you want to be free, you do need to be brave. Take those everyday courageous steps.
Lisa, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.